All right, everyone, welcome to our Q&A Cafe. Today we're doing tools for better performing collection activities in SAP Business ByDesign with our pre-sales director, Laura Herculo. And I'm Kayla, your facilitator, so please put in your questions in the chat box or in the question box, and I'll get to them after Laura's done the presentation portion of this session. And then that's it. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we're recording this session. I'll send it out to everyone after this is done. It usually goes out 2 days after this is done. So probably Friday, you'll get it through your email with information on our next Q&A Cafe, which is next Wednesday, same time. It is running, dunning, balance confirmations inside ByDesign. So that's next week. So please make sure you register if you're interested, and also always send your topic suggestions to myself, Kayla. And I will hand it over to you, Laura.
All right, thanks everybody for joining. As Kayla mentioned, my name's Laura Herculo, and I'm the pre-sales director here. So I think Alex and I are sort of tag teaming these Q&A cafes to help give you some more structured topics on how you can leverage ByDesign and give you some ideas on some maybe new things that maybe even newer topics that you haven't taken full advantage of yet, as well as maybe to introduce you to some new things within the application as they start coming out within like the roadmap topics. What I'm going to show you today, two different ways, and this really works in tandem with Alex's presentation for next week of kind of that overall picture of collections management from balance confirmation. I'm going to show you sort of a new quiver in your, or arrow in your quiver, if you will, that you can use to proactively remind people for when they have outstanding payments. We're going to show the collections management, which is new, and then after all of those attempts to get payment from your customers, the whole dunning process. So as I mentioned, that'll be kind of your whole end-to-end collections management features within ByDesign. So like I said, today I'm going to show the meat of the sandwich topics, really using the collections management, and then, like I said, proactive collections within ByDesign. So one, we'll start with the collection cases because that's just a standard piece of functionality, and then the other one is we'll move into the proactive collections, which is something that I put together, which uses really the broadcast bursting and scheduling of reports to your customers, and I'll show you how we can set those up to really streamline that process. So in the collection cases, we're going to go through the configuration, we'll do the execution, and then I'll show you some reports. So we'll kind of flip back and forth between a presentation and some of the live execution and show you how it actually works. The collection case workflow is really all initiates from an AR due item. Every time a invoice is released from ByDesign, it automatically for you will create a collection case in the system, and that stays open until you actually receive payment for that invoice. So the collection case has a couple different components to it. So you've got really at the collection case header, it's got priorities, which are automatically set by the system depending on different criteria, and I have that in this presentation. The next activity due date. So there's different activities that automatically get queued up within the actual collection, within the collection case, that you can set different thresholds. So automation of when that next activity needs to occur, who the actual overall responsible party is, whether it's someone internal or even external. If you use service agents or collection agency, you can actually have those assigned to someone else, so you can just manage when you have collection cases out. So kind of queuing in with the whole dunning process. If things are in arrears for X amount of days, we can send them off to collections, and then we can track the progress of those collections. And then finally, just the promise to pay date. So when your customer actually tells you that they're going to pay it. Underneath the collection case, there's numerous activities that get kicked off within that collection case. So each different activity that happens has a category and a subcategory, and that can be used for reporting purposes and things like that. And I'll show you some of those different reports later. And then what the category and the subcategory are basically a waterfall type thing. So I have my category, and then based on that category, I can have multiple subcategories tied back to that category. So it's not just a double, 2-field list. And then the combination of the category and subcategory selection actually allows you to enter proposed instructions to the assignee of what they actually need to do. And so you'll have multiple activities that get generated through the course of that collection case. And then the notes section is really how do I capture what I did on that case. And so you can have one note that goes over many cases. One of the things that we always hear a lot with our customers is, at least in some traditional things that I've seen on collections management, that you have to handle each invoice one to one and fill those up. And that's just really not a standard use case and not really how things happen in the world today. They might have 5 or 6 invoices that are outstanding, and you want to be able to select each of those when you make the phone call and log all of your notes. So this allows you to actually very easily both categorize and attach notes to multiple invoice or case items at one time without having to kind of go singularly into each individual one, which isn't really a very prevalent feature across ByDesign, so you should like how that works. And then walking through just to enable it, very simple, enabling collections, obviously is in business configuration. So like I said, I think this came out in the I want to say like 1905 or 1908 release of ByDesign. So if you didn't catch it in the release notes, it doesn't automatically come in. You'll have to go through business configuration to enable the scope. And so you want to go to your scoping questions under cash flow management, payables and receivables processing. Make sure that payments and clearing are activated, and I'm assuming that everybody on ByDesign does have that, so that's something that you don't need to care about. But then the big part in the same area in the step 4 in the questions, there is a receivables and collection management question, and that's where you want to activate that as yes. And then with that, there's also a new work center view that comes along with the collections management. So you would add that it comes in under the receivables work center. And so you'll just need to make sure that once you do enable it, update either your users and or your business roles to include that. And one step below that, after you enable it, a fine-tuning activity comes into play where you set up what your workflow needs to be and what your reasons and categories are and your instructions to the collections team. So this is just a quick snippet of the three different areas. So you'll see at the top, you've got your categories. Those are what pops up as your major category of the late payment, why they're late. And those obviously can be whatever you want. A lot of these are coming, but SAP delivers what you see here out of the box. So you should have some baseline for what you might want to use, or just edit any of these things. Like I went through and edited a few of the instructions and things like that. And then so as you select each of the different category codes, those subcategories, that subcategory table will change underneath. So like I said, it's not two independent tables, they're dependent upon each other. So you can have potentially even the same subcategories across under a category, but have different instructions for things that you want to do. And then within that subcategory, as you are defining that, you'll also have a days to complete. And what that drives is as you finish one activity, it automatically will assign the next activity date. So again, your collections team can see when they need to do something else with that open collections case. And then last, within each of the different subcategories, you'll assign the different instructions. So it just basically tells the collection agent what they need to do. Do they need to send a task to ABC person, or do they need to go in and reprint an invoice, or things like that? So it just really guides them as to what actions they need to take. All right, and so the collections workflow really easy. The invoice, as soon as, like I mentioned, as soon as the invoice is released, the collection case is created automatically in the collections work center. An agent can come in and pick up the case. They'll contact the case, they'll contact the customer, categorize the case, add some notes. They'll complete their activities based on the conversations that they had. The system will then generate a next activity date automatically. And then from there, it just becomes a back and forth where you're managing activities. And every time you have a new activity, you've got the categorization of the conversation that you had, generates the next activity date until you actually receive the payment, and then the case is completed. So let's pop in, and I just pop these different screenshots in here so you have them. I'm gonna, Kayla or I will send these out to you after, so you at least have a guideline overall of how to configure it and what we talked about today. All right, good. So again, just popping back into here, so looking at the receivables and then the collection cases work center view, you'll see that because you've got that one-to-many activities, the collection case has numerous activities under it, but there's only one activity open at any given time. So after you complete even though this is in process now, I might complete this activity, and then that will trigger the next not started activity. So that can be then assigned to someone else within the organization if it needs to maybe go up the chain or whatever. So you'll notice if I'm something that's in process from this actual work list, I can't edit things like the notes or the categories because I've already started it, I've already categorized it, I've already started work on this particular task, so I have to jump into it. And then to do that, you'll see that I can come in and just edit this guy. And so we're looking at invoice 324 as an example. I can select any of my contacts of who I physically called. And then again, what the category is. So what do they tell me if it was missing or wrong data? Maybe they needed to resend the invoice because they haven't done anything yet, or they haven't seen anything. And then you'll notice as I select that subcategory, those instructions will automatically pop up. Right. And from here, you'll see really overall the details of the document itself. You'll notice that obviously, again, you've got the hyperlinks that you can jump directly into the invoice itself. You can also jump to the account monitor, back to that whole point of you're not calling just about one invoice in some cases, or many cases you're calling about a few, especially if they're overdue. So we can jump into there and actually have that conversation about, I'm not just calling about invoice 324 for $3,000. We're talking about a much larger issue, and I can categorize all those things from here. And then I can set up, once we do have that discussion, what their promise to pay date is once I do resend that invoice. So we talked about this. Put all my notes, and the next person that might pick it up, or me, if I have to refer back to it, I can always refer back to it as well. And so you can keep running notes on an open case. And then you'll see, again, any other activities that that happened on here and the details that were related to it. So if constantly you're getting the runaround of every day you call and something else is wrong with why they're not paying you, we can always keep track of that information, that we know someone's pulling the wool over your eyes, if you will. And then any sorts of attachments, maybe if they need to send you some sort of documentation, or you sent them, maybe they're missing a CSC or something like that that prevents them from paying an invoice, send that out and put the attachment on there. I also have the same capability as I do across the whole application, where I can do ad hoc tasks for people. So if I'm just the collection agent, I don't have access to reprint or resend invoices, and I need to have someone in the AR department do all of that. I can just send them a new task or a notification, and it'll append the collection case to them so they can resend the invoice. All right. And so I can save that. Again, if I save it, it's going to be in process, but then I can complete that activity, and it'll now just append that new running record of when they when they activate it. And so when I refresh this, we'll now see that the promise to pay date will populate, and then a new next activity date will also populate as well based on the information that I had. So we've got that as 5-1. And then because I categorized it with missing information, resend the info based on these rules that I have set up in the background, that it has 1 day to complete that. And so potentially my next activity is going to be, hey, did you receive that invoice and when are you going to pay? All right. Are there any questions on that piece? No. All right. As I also mentioned here too, that you've got the ability to select multiple multiple cases and then add any sort of notes to those. So notes, if I wanted to do that. So things that we talked about, you'll then see these below in my work list, my new note, and it'll keep all the running total. And this is really nice, again, for that agent to be able to look at this and see all the different conversations that are had just in one screen. Sometimes it's difficult. You have to jump into a lot of hoops to see running totals of notes. You have to go right into the document, but to be able to see it from the overview is really good to get that quick peek into the information. I also have the capability again in here to edit the category directly for multiple things. So if they've got, maybe it's an other and an other, whatever their promise to pay date is out here. And then I can complete that activity. So that will, again, automatically update the information for those guys. Right. And then since it moves from one category to another, so now I'll see a new activity pop up that's not started in the next due date in there. All right. Okay, and then just the last piece is, or just some of the analytics that come along with the collection case. There's 2 out of the box reports that come out of here, and they're not bad. There's the collection cases, so it's really looking at everything so you can monitor all of your collection cases by the employees and the due date. And then there's the transactions, which sort of go hand in hand, almost with like, it has sort of like an aging like feel to it. I also created off of this data source collection case analytics, because I kind of think from my perspective, if I was to look at this and, you know, why am I doing all this work? What do I want to figure out of this? Why are people not paying? Is it one due to the fact that maybe my payment terms are too short? Maybe I'm not offering incentives like discounts for early payment. Maybe all of my master data is messed up and I don't have the right emails or the send methods or things like that. So when you're setting this up, you really can get some, by properly having your categories and subcategories in here, you can really get some deep insights as to potential projects to help your customer pay you more outside of, you know, unforeseen circumstances that they're working through. So I'll just dive into some of them, so you can get really just, again, an anatomy of the report itself. So these are all by default out of the box. And so you can actually see in here the due period in days. So everything, this is all by employee, where you can see who's handling what. So obviously I have a terrible company that I'm working in, because all of our payables are pretty much way overdue by 40 days. So everything is really sort of in arrears here. But I can just quickly at a glance see how much from a dollar value, what is outstanding and what's not. And then I've got my different periods and due dates, and I can switch these guys around too if I wanted to, like move the key figures up and down and look at sort of overall what my overdue is, and then who's responsible for each of those. So I get some pretty decent insights in here. And you've got, I see you guys know your existing customers, how to slice and dice the different bits of the different bits of data that are in here. The other piece is that collection case transactions. And I think this could be a really good report. The one piece that from me, again, telling you the things I do like and don't like as I'm learning and digging into these things, they've got this hard-coded date in here, and the relative selections don't enable you to do something that's like greater than something that's due out into the future or less or already late. So you really have to put in either a static date range or use a combination of things. So that's why for me, I created within a couple minutes a custom just a custom report off of the data source, so I could eliminate the mandatory date field in here, and I can open it completely wide for the status of the case as well as the date range. Because I think, again, to my point earlier, of being able to analyze why people are paying late is really, really valuable for you as an organization. So creating that was able to do that. So just one of the things to keep in mind as you're looking at these data sources, one of the things that I did find, they're very basic as you open them up, the default ones to start. So as either a key user or a standard user, you'll definitely want to utilize the add fields option in here. So I think even like customer wasn't even part of the standard piece in here. So being able to put the business partner and the collection information in here, as well as any sort of other information related to like the due date and whatnot, we want to keep that in there. So that's just my little hints and tips and tricks to you. And so again, I just created other new lists here where I can look and see everything that's due out into the next 30 days and what the status is of each of those different cases, the amount due, and then you'll also see the amount, the P2P date is the promise to pay date, and see when things are when people need to pay. All right, so that is it for the collections case piece. Were there any questions? I think there might be one question. Oh, nope, just wrong screen. All right. Any other questions? Just pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll go into the proactive collections. Right. Good. Okay. So let's look at the proactive collections. And this is using broadcast bursting. So I don't know how much detail you know about the scheduling of reports and broadcast bursting, but just as a quick overview, a broadcast burst is a way to schedule a report within ByDesign and send it out to multiple people. But what it actually does in a smart way is it will automatically parse a subset of the data within one report to a list, and it can be sent to a list of either internal or external recipients, which makes it really cool. So many use cases for this. Again, if we look at overall collections, this fills a really good part that a lot of systems, ByDesign included, doesn't really have. Of you've got, again, dunning that happens after the fact. You've got confirmations, balance confirmations that are for, do you agree with what I have? But then there's nothing really in there that says, hey, do you know you have an upcoming payment that's due? So this really fills that hole. So basically what I did was set up a report that sends a reminder of upcoming due payments to our customers. We say, hey, you're due out within the next 30 days, these types of these invoices. And so from an execution standpoint, it's really simple. All you do is set up your base report for the execution, and then I'll show you how to do the quick setup of the actual broadcast itself. Oops. And then just, there's always some little gotchas in here. So just to give you some of the little details as I've been working through doing a lot of different use cases for how to use the broadcast bursts. Here's where I started. So I took my, actually, we're going to look at open, the open items. Go. And you want to do this if you're going to set up any sort of broadcast burst. You're going to want to be in your administrator role through Business Analytics Work Center. You can't just set up a private view and then use that in a broadcast burst. It has to all be done through the Business Analytics Work Center. So what I did was I set up a selection for due in the next 30 days, which was a corporate view. And then I also set up a broadcast for the next 30 days view as well. So you can pull in really any information that you want to. Now, the big key in here and to enable it to get to the right people is that you want to make sure that you have your email in here. So it can't just be, so if I'm in like an add fields area here and you see, you have within the customer itself that you can pull in any sort of characteristic that's tied to the customer. You want to make sure that when you've got something like an email address of that business partner, that you display it in the reports and display it in the selection, so then it becomes its own standalone object as opposed to just a characteristic of that customer or business partner. And one of the things that, as I'm starting to kind of tool around in here, there's definitely enhancements that you, depending on the level of the amount of contacts that you have within a particular customer, you may want to take something like this and actually join your tables from the accounts receivable open items to like your contact, the contact data source, or your communication channels data source. So then you can actually pick and choose specific recipients within the document itself. If that opens up a lot of questions, you just let me know. We'll do a separate session on how to do joins and things like that. But this was just a real simple example where I took just on the header of the customer what their email address is, so it's going to go there. And so what will happen in the background, as I mentioned in here, as I run this report, it will take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different the 5 different customers and all of their upcoming due receivables, and it'll send out 5 separate emails to each of these different addresses. So if you think about, I know back in my day where I worked with a lot of suppliers, I was constantly running an individual report, appending it to an email, waiting for them to call me back, and then updating all my purchase orders and things like that. Super cumbersome, took a lot of time to run that. Really wasted non-value add time. This can be set up that every single week I run it and it will just send that reminder out to the customer. So there's your base report. And then in order to enable the broadcast, you would go into your business analytics and the broadcasts. And here I've set up just that standard open receivables report. And you've got all the capabilities in here of seeing when it was last run and who was successfully sent to. And then it'll also give you details as to like if something got bounced, if it's not an accurate email or things like that. And then you've got the capability in here to schedule it for however long you want, start it, kick it off, delete it, whatnot. You guys probably all hopefully use at least this in some way, shape, or form. But as we go to the broadcast of this new one, we just pick that object name. So that's the new report that we were just looking at. I can send out actually new one. We'll just start a new one. Let's see, what is it? Receivables. What is that guy? Accounts receivable. What? All right. And then we've got our channel, the subject, what the message needs to be. I'm pretty sure you can also, I think I have to double check. You might be able to use like some smart tags in here as well, to maybe personalize it with their name or things like that. But the important part is that you're going to use the broadcast bursting, and then we select what the attribute is for the email. So that's basically, you want to make sure that that field that you, that's why I mentioned you want to make sure that that field is available when and do the add fields for which field is pulling the email. So let me, I'm not going to go searching for it, but we will just go back into this guy. So I did put this in as part of the business partner. You've got your email. This also can take into account custom fields too. So if you want to potentially on an order of like, you know, on your, maybe on your customer master and pull it through to orders and invoices like communication contact or things like that, we can add that in there. And then you can decide how you want to send it out. So you've got some nice, nice different functions in here, whether you want to send it in Excel or just a link. Probably the link is more for your internal folks. And then what view and the selection that you want, if it's going to be big files, what the zip is, and then how often that you want to run it. Either you're going to do it ad hoc or periodically. And so as the result, once that actually does get sent out, your users or your customers will receive a fancy dancy little email. It's got your do not reply, and then it shows you based on this, attaches a list of any invoices in the next 30 days, and then they can come in and just download that bad boy. And they've got a nice view into everything that they've got open and the total value of the invoices that they had. Okay. So again, I put that back into here too, of like what comes in, what comes out, so you have a sense for what people are receiving. You see that? All right. So it's still got a little time. I finished up pretty quickly on here. I don't know if there's any questions that anybody has. I can sort of open up the voice, I think, in here if you want. So you guys, I don't know, Laura or Norm, if you've got any questions on anything. I just opened it up to talk rather than having to type in the chat since there's only a few of us. So do you have any questions on any of the topics that I reviewed? Or is there something else you wanted to see? No? Okay. Well, if you do have any questions, I am always available. Like I said, I will send out, I'll send out this presentation, or Kayla will send this out with the recording. And then, like I said, I'm a pre-sales director, so I'm not directly on anyone's account, but always ready to help out. I love to do this kind of stuff. Any sort of reporting or questions that you have, please feel free just to reach out to me directly. I'll include all my contact information in the slide deck as well. All right. With that, thanks for joining, and please join us next week for the bread of the sandwich around the collections management process with Alex. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Kayla.